Welcome to Dead Men Talking Podcast, where nonsense meets common sense. And now your hosts, Frank and Bill.
All right. Well, if you missed our first podcast, we are two guys, one with cancer, one without, trying not to get cancer or anything else chronic.
Correct. And on today's show, we're going to take it straight from the beginning, Bill. We're going to take it back to the hospital room, finding out the diagnosis about a chronic disease and how you deal with it.
That's right. And we're Dead Men Talking. And, you know, last week we got into some stories. And, Frank, I wanted to hear more about, you mentioned you got shot, and we glossed right over that.
Yeah.
I want to hear the story.
Let me explain that, because it's not like a Biggie Smalls Tupac issue, but it was. I was in college. We were with some guys out in a farmer's field picking some. We were foresting. Let's put it that way.
Probably
Foraging.
on someone else's property.
More than likely, according to the farmer's shotgun.
Okay. Oh, I see.
So when we were running, and I guess I wasn't fast enough. What they say, you just got to be faster than the guy beside you. I wasn't the fastest. So I heard the gunshot go off, and I felt the sting in my butt, leg area. So I thought it was shot. But come to conclusion that it was just rock salt.
But you were still shot with rock salt.
I thought I pooped my pants. Yeah, I was scared. I was scared. It got real dramatic. Go on without me. And I look back and it's just a flesh wound. But your mind will take you down a weird road if you think you're really hurt. Let's just put it that way. But it wasn't as dramatic as it sounded last week.
Well, yeah, you heard the gun go off and you thought, oh, I'm dead.
Well, I almost made it. I was close to the fence. I just didn't want to drop my bag of vegetables.
And the farmer thought, crazy kids, get them out of here. I'll show them. Yeah, well, that'll teach you a lesson, I'm sure.
He was a good shot.
I guess he was. But you survived.
Yes. It was a full recovery, and we were able to actually enjoy the rest of our trip with a couple Band-Aids, so we were fine.
Okay, well, now I had to know the rest of that story, Frank. I had to know what the shooting was all about. But so you survived that. That's good. So that's part of the reason we're Dead Men Talking. And, you know, in a weird way, in a weird sense, we're all dying every moment, right? Because the day we're born, we're kind of dying. However, we can also look at that. We're living, but we're dying at the same time. So good story, Frank. I like that. Well, today we want to talk about what happens when you get that first diagnosis. What do you do? You're not in your normal state of mind, and what goes through your mind. And I wanted to ask you, you know, it was not the same as me getting a cancer diagnosis, but recently you had a scare, which is part of the reason we're doing this podcast, is you had a scare, your blood pressure went up and you had to go to the hospital. I want to hear a little bit about that. What did that make you feel like, and what was going through your mind at the time?
Well, a few things. One, my best friend, Dan Abital, just died from a heart attack at 52. Hit the floor before he knew what happened. I knew we both lived similar lifestyles, worked the same amount of hours. We're very successful at what we did. But then I started taking my blood pressure and going to get tests at the life screening and getting all my arteries tested, all that stuff. But then I was meditating in the morning like I do my normal ritual. And I took my blood pressure, and it was 190 over 117, and I had felt tense. I wasn't sleeping well, and, you know, I had acid reflux all the time. And, you know, I just was like, oh, it's just I'm eating bad or drinking bad, or it's just that. But I get to the doctor, and they're like, no, because these levels aren't sustainable. They just aren't. So the bottom number is the one that scared me the most, because that's the number that you have a stroke. And I know it sounds selfish, but I'd rather. My grandmother had a stroke, and I watched her not being able to talk to us as a little kid, and I don't want that ever. Having somebody else wipe your bottom and take care of you.
Right.
I think I'd rather have the top number take me out in a heart attack and just take me out completely.
Well, like we were talking earlier, dead is dead. I mean, whether you die from cancer or some chronic illness or heart disease or whatever, you're still gone.
Yeah, they just didn't say I lost the battle to heart disease.
Right.
You don't hear that when you hear I lost the battle to cancer. Well, Yeah, but we're both dead.
Right.
So, so yeah, it scared the crap out of me. You're sitting there and you're in the hospital for half a day with machines hooked up to you all day, and it's counterintuitive, right? You're trying to get your blood pressure down, but now you're stressed about your blood pressure. So how do you get that down without medication?
Right. So it kind of freaks you out.
Oh, to this day, I still can't get it down all the way. So that's why sitting here and talking to you and learning from you and testing out some of this stuff. We talked about the celery juice challenge last week. I'm still doing that, and it's working. And it's not working like it's not the drink one cup and you're fixed.
Right.
But I got 46 years of bad living that I might have to clean out.
It takes a little while to clean out the junk.
Yeah, black mold's probably in there. I'm just saying, it's like an old building, so we gotta strip it down and rebuild it.
Well, that's a good point, and I think for anybody listening is that moment when you're in the hospital and you start getting inside your head. Deeper maybe than you had been. You start asking the questions. How sick am I? I don't want to end up like, Grandpa Joe or Uncle Bob, who's, laying in the corner and he can't feed himself. I mean, seriously, we don't. And, so for me, I went as I told last week, I went to the hospital and I learned instantly within a very short period of time, my kidneys are failing. I have a form of multiple myeloma that is worse than your average myeloma called plasma cell leukemia. It's a blood disease. And, in my case, I needed triage. They were literally trying to keep me alive. So, my scenario was a little bit different. So, but the same emotions happen is that I went through that phase where I just didn't know what to think. And your brain isn't working. You really are lost for thoughts because you're scared and you're fearful, and it's just hard to think when you're in that moment.
Well, take us to that moment. You're sitting there in the hospital, right over in Atrium, right? Is that where you were?
Well, yeah, Presby,
sorry. And the doctor walks in and gives you the diagnosis that you have cancer and that you're going to die. What? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, and so that's the thing, and that's what we wanted to talk about today is when you get that diagnosis, your mind, it doesn't think clearly, because when you go into that state of fear and unknown and uncertainty, no human being performs at its best when we get information like that. Any type of grief and sad news, most people don't do well and can't control their thoughts like that. So for me, I was very scared, and it's hard to process and think, what do I do next? As a matter of fact, a lot of the things they were telling me, I couldn't remember. I was trying to keep it all straight, but it's coming at me pretty fast and I'm processing it. And then when they give you that diagnosis, it's so unknown. You don't know what to think about it because, you're still trying to process, is this all real? And it certainly is, because there's doctors and lab technicians telling you that and showing you the lab results. So
how long did it take for it to actually settle in where you could actually chew on it?
Well, so let's say I probably got to the hospital at 10 in the morning, and they were running labs, and bit by bit throughout the day, probably by noon, or 1 o'clock, I had the first real diagnosis that this is really bad. And then they admitted me to the hospital, and then I had to do a bone marrow biopsy. And that, I was probably early in the evening at the hospital. I had to wait for that. And, when all that came back, it was that first night, Frank, that I felt, okay, here I've got the full diagnosis. And, now I began to really process, because by then I knew exactly how bad it was. And that's when, you just get into a real, almost a state of depression there for a moment, where you're just, holy cow, what's happening here with me? And then that's not a good place, because you don't think clearly and you're just so sad, and you're in a place that you've never been before.
What were you by yourself at this time?
That night, well, of course, Dana had come to the hospital, but she had to go back and take care of Daniel. And so that first night I was in the hospital by myself for periods of time. Dana came over and was with me, but there were moments of time when I was by myself. And that's probably the loneliest moment, that you realize I'm by myself. And what am I going to do? And it's hard to think about what you're going to do when you're by yourself without anybody to bounce it off of.
Well, did you go? I know anytime I have, it's not the same, but anytime I have even a bad headache, I'm Googling, how do I fix this? I mean, were you at that stage yet, or were you just sitting there?
No, I
watching?
really wasn't. I hadn't gotten to that phase, and I didn't really have anybody counseling me yet at that, other than the doctors and nurses saying, look, we're trying to keep you alive. And like I said, I was in triage. I was in a different place than a lot of others are, in that, I didn't have a choice. It wasn't like I got a diagnosis and, I was at home and they said, okay, this is what's going on and you're going to have to make some decisions and do something. I was in the hospital and they were trying to keep me alive. So very different scenario for me, where I'm just sitting there wondering what's going to happen, and that was the first phase for me.
So your kidneys were still failing at this time.
Yes. Yeah. And they were, the thing for me is they were trying to balance how much chemo they give me to stop the cancer. Because the cancer was, again, this is a great story and reason why you need to be proactive. And if something is wrong, get it checked. Because if I had known 3 months earlier, it would have been significantly easier on me and I wouldn't have had to do all the things we did in the hospital. But I didn't. I just didn't. And that's, live and learn. And I would encourage everybody, if you feel bad, go to the doctor, get the diagnosis as fast as you can. So you're not in that triage moment.
When you say easier, what would have been easier? You just wouldn't have had a fix.
Well, my body wouldn't have been under such duress. Whereas by the time I was in the hospital, they had to try to stop the cancer from killing me, but my kidneys were failing because I had let the cancer get so bad.
I got you.
So that's the problem there, is that if I'd not let it get so bad, then my kidneys probably wouldn't be in that state, and the cancer wouldn't have been at that state. It would have been easier for the oncologist to get the cancer back under control.
So from my standpoint, sitting across the table, having to come into the hospital room and see you, I wasn't there at that time, but take us to your wife coming in, and because now you have to deal with your own fears, but also manage your loved ones' fears. How'd you deal with that?
Yeah, and that she's a amazing and tough woman, and so she is very strong. But obviously, I'm concerned for her, and I'm concerned for my son, and concerned for the family. And so, we're looking at each other trying to figure, okay, how do we figure this out? What are we going to do? And so she began researching other doctors. And that's what we're going to talk about. What do we do first here? Because, I think the first thing that I didn't understand then, and that I would encourage everybody to do, is to take a step back. And here's the reason, is because you're so scared and freaked out when you're in this moment. And we titled this episode Breathe, because that's the first thing you have to do. And you have to do it because you've got to realize that you're in a place that's not normal for you. You're scared. You really are scared. And one of the things I started reading about was breathing when I got diagnosed. And I don't know where that came up in my research, but I started reading about people trying to get your emotions and your anxiety under control, because you're in a state of heightened anxiety when this happens. And so I started reading books about breathing, and you want to talk about, I thought this was complete snake oil and bogusness. There are people saying, oh, if you just deep breathe, it'll make you feel better and reduce your stress. And I was like, come on, I breathe every day. Well, breathing deeper, can it really do anything? And it can. And I thought it was complete nonsense. Frank, you and I studied, and we should probably do a whole episode on Wim Hof.
Oh yeah, the Dutch extremist, the Iceman.
The Iceman, right? And the Iceman talks about cold, but he also talks about deep breathing and changing your molecular and cellular structure through deep breathing. And I kind of got into a little bit of this, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's important to stop for a second and breathe, because you got to calm down, and because you got to think clearly when you're in this moment. You really do.
Well, and there's so many deep breathing exercises. The Calm app, Wim Hof's app, which is great. But I got to give you a little story on the Wim Hof, because I tried it. And I went out and I was watching him. He's sitting in an ice bath. He's run marathons in bare feet in the snow, and he's just insane. And he's hysterical to watch if you ever get to watch him. Wim Hof, Wimhof. So I tried it. I did the 30-day challenge. and I was doing his deep breathing exercises. And it was insane that you could hold your breath for 2.5 minutes after you get done doing this exercise. The way it brings oxygen into your lungs.
Yeah, and you wouldn't think that would do that much because, like I said, when I first read about it, I thought, well, I breathe every day. What difference could this be? And it is. And so, how long did it take you to be able to hold your breath for a couple minutes?
Very quickly. I mean, a minute and a half was the first time. And I've never been able to I never really tried. I mean, I'm 46. We don't have those contests as much as we used to in grade school.
Like, yeah, when you're a kid, you're just going to, how long can I hold my breath and swim under the pool, right?
Or I'd hold my breath just to get what I wanted. Hold your breath and pout, and I'd pass out purple. I'd try that.
Well, they've studied this. I was talking to some people that are in the police and armed forces, and they're actually studying that before they make tactical maneuvers, they just take one big deep breath. And the guys doing it thought, just like me, this is a bunch of hooey, this won't do anything. But they have studied that normal performance without the deep breath versus the deep breath before they go in and breach a room or, get put in harm's way to attack bad guys. And their performance is significantly better just by the deep breathing prior to entering. It calms their mind. It clears their mind. So we have studies that know that factually that this works. So the first thing that I encourage everybody to do is breathe. Take a step back and take a deep breath and calm your mind. So that's the first thing when somebody gets a diagnosis that I really encourage everybody to do, because you can't think straight and you need to think straight. This is not a time to just, whatever the doctor says. And listen, you have to listen to the doctors and nurses. In my case, I had no choice. But if you get a diagnosis and you're thinking about what to do, you're not at the hospital, you've had some tests, you need to think clearly. So go for a walk, deep breathe, just deep breathing and exhaling. You'd be surprised what it'll do to your physiology.
Well, let's take this back a little bit, because we talked about Dana for a second. We talked about, and you mentioned earlier to me about key advocates and the importance of that in the hospital.
Right.
Because we got to breathe, we got to exhale. All right, this is happening. We can't change it. All right, we're going to have to deal with it.
Right.
Now we got to see who's around us that's going to help us change it, right?
Right. And that is the second thing, Frank, that, the first thing you need to do is you need to breathe and you need to kind of gather your thoughts. The second thing and most important thing you need to do is decide who is that key advocate. Sometimes, it's known it's your husband, it's your wife, it's your brother or sister or friend or your mom or dad, whoever that is. But you need to decide, because somebody needs to be your right hand throughout this process. That's just really, really important.
And tell me some of the key roles that the advocate does for you.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that there's so many things coming at you. You need somebody there to listen and be a second set of ears. You need somebody to take some notes. We actually recorded conversations. I don't know if that's legal or
I don't
unlegal.
think that's legal.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure.
I don't know. But
HIPAA might say something.
They might not like that. But it was our lives, and so there were times where we recorded things because we couldn't remember. There was so much being said, and it's medical terminology that we don't know because we're not doctors, and so we really need to understand, what are they saying here. So you need an advocate there to ask questions, to take notes, to listen to everything that's being said, to get copies of the blood work, to get copies of what drugs are you taking and what dosages. We don't even think about this, but it's important to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I got to say this, is that it is so important to do these things, and it's really important to take control of your health. There is no doctor or nurse that is going to care about you more than you. There's nobody that's going to, when you go home, it's your life. It's not their life. They're going to do their best for you, but at the end of the day, it's your life. So you have to make these decisions with them, and you have to be involved. And so having a key advocate is really important, because you don't know what you'll miss. Trust me. I mean, there were moments that when I was on so many drugs and getting blood work and tired, I know I wasn't listening well to what the doctors were saying or nurses were saying. I know I wasn't getting everything that they were saying to me.
Yeah, so thank God you had Dana there to take that down, because then you were able to review it. And you spoke about looking at your blood work and your charts and your paperwork and the notes. Where can you find all that?
Well, that's a great question that I didn't know this, but every hospital system has an online portal. And, we signed up for that. And so we could get it on our phone. And that way, once labs were loaded in the system, we could go online and look at the labs and look at the blood work and look at the, the drugs and prescriptions and things that we needed to have. And that's really helpful so that you have a history of what's going on and your next steps and what you've done in the past. So that's the second thing. Decide on your key advocate. And then, there's 5 things here in today's conversation. And the third one is, what is the diagnosis? That's what it's amazing. Some people aren't even sure what their diagnosis is. They'll say, oh, I have leukemia, or, oh, I got this, or, okay, what else? What does that mean? And they'll say, well, what do you mean? I've got this.
There's different kinds?
Well, there's all kinds of different kinds. And then because each person is different, what's your prognosis? Somebody says, oh, I've got such and such. Okay, great. What's the prognosis? Well, the doctor says they can cure it. I'm doing curative therapy with these protocols or this surgery or whatever, and then they think they can get it and I'll be cured. Well, that's unbelievable. Okay, is it a breast cancer? Is it a prostate cancer? What is it? Because there are certain cancers that they've got a really good handle on that they can deal with. Then there's others they don't. And so it's really important to know, what is it that you've got, the diagnosis. You need to know, are you doing palliative care or curative care? I didn't know what that word was, but palliative means...
I still don't.
Right. So, palliative care is just, I'm trying to keep you alive. That's what they're doing with palliative care. They're trying to keep you alive because they don't have a cure. So it's important to know that, because some people think, oh, I'm doing these treatments. And in their mind, they think the doctor's making me better. No, the doctor's just keeping you alive. So to me, now it may be different for other people, the way I viewed that is, oh, the doctor doesn't have a way to cure me, so I better figure something out to help my body, because they don't know.
So is it the hospitals that have certain cancers or have a better handle on certain cancers, or is it just the cancer overall? Because there's different parts of the country, different levels of care. Tell us a little bit about that.
2 things. First off, the type of cancer. Certain cancers are more easily treatable.
Like generally. Which ones?
Such example, if you get a breast cancer early, they know what to do. Or I referenced prostate cancer. Usually prostate cancer, they've got things they can do that they can treat so that people can live long, long, long lives with those type of cancers. It's just an example of a couple of them. Sure. So it's important to know which one you have and what the treatment protocol is and what the life expectation is. Some people don't even ask. They're afraid to ask. I'm like, holy cow, if you've got a cancer diagnosis, you need to ask the hard questions up front.
Well, that's a great point, because I talked to you about this earlier, was if you could find out the day you were going to die, would you want to know it?
Right.
And maybe some people just don't want to know it, because I'll give you a prime example of this. I was reading the Medical Median book, that has all the cure-alls of these cleanses. Cleanse to Heal, it was called.
Right.
And I read it as a nice read before bedtime. So I'm reading it, and I put the book down, and I had basically a panic attack, Bill, because it went through all the viruses that live in my liver, and I'm thinking about anything, if I'm breathing with a little wrong, that I'm dying. So it took me about 45 minutes to fall asleep. So note to self, or anybody listening, don't read that book before bed.
That's not a good read before bed.
No. It's like, I'd rather not know all this. That way I'm not paranoid about it, because you can't change it. So, so with your cancer, in your case, what was the prognosis on average for somebody to get diagnosed with plasma cell leukemia?
Well, and that was the important thing to know and that's, as Dana and I were doing the research from the hospital, we're like, holy crap, this is not good. This is very rare. It's very fast that it attacks you. And so we realized quickly that this is one of those diseases, and this is one of the things that moves so quickly and it's so aggressive. We need to be really active in what we're doing very proactive because that's how serious this disease was. And it's different if I'd had normal myeloma and they'd said, well, lifespan's 5 years and it takes time. Well, that's still bad, but it wasn't nearly as bad as my prognosis. So it made us be more proactive, I think, than we might have otherwise been.
So just in one sentence, what was your prognosis and diagnosis? Like,
basically, you'll be lucky if you can live 6-7 months.
You're listening to Dead Men Talking.
You are listening to the Dead Men Talking podcast, brought to you by Helix Lifestyle. Helix Lifestyle is a philanthropic company discussing the healing process through research and clinical success. If you know someone who has cancer or whose life is impacted by chronic illness, please share this podcast with them. Thanks for listening.
okay.
Because it's that fast. And that's when we were all like, not good at all. This is not good.
So it was palliative. They were just seeing how long they'd keep you alive for.
That's it.
That was the only game they were playing.
Right. So the first thing for them was, we've got to keep you alive in this day and then get you out of the hospital. And then we're going to try to get you healthy enough to do a autologous stem cell transplant. But they didn't even know that I could get that healthy. A lot of people die before they get that way, or they never get in a state where they're ready to be able to have a transplant.
So now you have diagnosis. So
Right.
what do you do with that? I mean, you just take it for what it's will, or do you get a second opinion?
Great question. So the first thing we did, and we had, once we had the diagnosis, and as we were learning about this disease, we were researching, Googling and going online and reading all kinds of things about it. And, that's what you talk about. You start reading this book before bed and you realize,
Awful.
Oh, right. Oh, all these crazy things in me could kill me. Okay, this is where you got to control your mind. This is, and we're going to have a whole episode on this. But, for me, as I got that diagnosis, okay, all right, now I've got it. Now I want to talk to the expert of experts. Who is that? And I want to get a second opinion. And I didn't know who that was or where we had to fly to get it, but I was going to get it because it seemed like this is my health. This is serious. Think about how much time we research a television when we buy it, Frank.
Yeah.
Think about that. We're looking online. How much does it cost? What's the size of it? Imagine when we buy a car. We're looking, what's the miles per gallon? Oh, does it do this? We spend more time looking for a TV than we do a doctor to save our life. How dumb is that?
But at the same time, at least the electronics industry is at least third party certified. I mean, if I Google stuff on high blood pressure, any whack job in the world can put, eat these chocolate covered ants. They'll work.
Right.
And that could be at the top of the list. Or if you go to WebMD and you start reading that, you might as well just check out the rest of your day, because you're just going to be so sad that you have every disease on earth.
That's right. Well, that's why I always say a lot of friends I know will become Dr. Google. And I'm like, yeah, you're not a real doctor. You need to go see a real doctor.
Yeah.
And get another opinion. Yeah. So what we did is we started looking for who are the best oncologists for this disease. And
where can you find that information that's credible?
That's the hardest part. We went to the cancer websites. We went to websites of the best cancer hospitals in the world. MD Anderson, Sloan Kettering. They're all listed. Duke. And we began thinking, all right, where do we go? Who's the person who knows most about these blood cancers and this particular blood cancer? And that's when we found out that locally there was a doctor that was an expert at this. And so that's when we said, let's go get a second opinion from him and let's go see if we can get in to see him. He's an expert at this. He knows this. He's top of his field. His background has been at a lot of hospitals that study this and were top in the world at this. So that's what we did.
So how did the two diagnoses differ?
Well, the diagnoses were the same, but the treatment protocols were slightly different. And that's the thing, is that it's not like there's one treatment protocol for every cancer. One oncologist might say, I want to use this combination of chemos, or I may want to do this variation of chemos. I think that's what I've learned about it, is that there's all these different drugs and the doctors may have better success with one versus the other.
Did you tell me the first cocktail they gave you of chemo almost made it worse?
Yeah, and that's something that I didn't know, and most people don't know, is that when I, and my wife, this is why you need a great caregiver. My wife was the one that reminded me of this, that one of the early chemos in the hospital that they gave me actually increased the level of cancer cells in my body. It was going the wrong way. And after, I don't know if it was one or maybe one big infusion of it or two, they said, whoa, this is not doing the right thing. And they switched out that drug for another one, which then started bringing it back down.
How bad are those drugs when they're putting it in you? Because I've heard all kinds of folklore about it. The suits they have to wear because it's pure poison.
Oh, it's pure poison. I mean, they're serious chemicals. Chemo is a toxic biohazard chemical. So, I had to sign away my life. Literally, I had to sign away waivers that said this drug that we're putting in to help you can give you kidney disease, liver disease, heart disease, can give you cancer and can kill you. I had to sign waivers to say, put this in my body and it could kill me.
Well, you had that going for you.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to look at the positives. That's what I'm saying.
Right. And you think about it, and I'm reading this in there going, wait, how bad off am I that I'm signing away a waiver that says this stuff could kill me or give me another cancer?
Yeah.
So
what's the other choice you have?
Well, that's right. That's it. And so I'm sitting there thinking, well, I could either die by not taking it. I'll probably die if I don't do it. I guess I better do it. But I was in that triage moment. And this is why you have to really think, because if you're not in the triage moment, you want to really think through this so you don't take drugs that create more cancer in your body.
And forget my ignorance. What is triage moment?
Well, so the triage moment, I guess I got that phrase because if you're ever do you remember the show MASH? See, that's how old I am.
I remember triage. I still don't know what it is.
Well, so triage is like when you're in a battlefield, they just need to fix you just enough to get you to a better place so you can be fixed. So they're really just putting a Band-Aid on it so you survive.
It's like me drinking Red Bull at a bar so I could have another drink.
There you go.
So I don't fall over.
That's right.
Is it similar? No.
That's very similar.
Okay.
Yeah. In other words, that's to keep going. That's right.
Yeah, just to keep, why have one more drink when you have Red Bull?
That's right. Let's have a Red Bull so we can have another drink.
Yeah, but that's usually when my brain turns off and says you're on your own.
You're on your own.
Your body's still running, but I'm shutting down because I don't want to remember any of this.
That's right. That's like the drinker's triage.
That's fair. That's fair. So, all right. So you have 2 diagnoses. You have treatment starting. So what do you do? You got all this information in front of you. You're Googling at home. You got your caregiver Googling. You have to have an overload of information.
Yeah.
How do you compare and what do you do with all that?
Right. And so, and that's the final thing is that we've got a little acronym CRD. And what we did is we compared, we researched, and then we decided. And so for us, it was take all that information that we've got. And then we also wanted to research around the world. Because remember, we're in the United States. We've been to a couple hospitals. We've researched all US-based stuff because of our healthcare system. But then just for our knowledge base, let's research around the world. What's going on around the world for this disease? Are there any other things? Are there alternative things that we haven't considered, just so we're aware of what they are? And I'll tell you an anecdotal story here about this. I had a neighbor who was a very competitive downhill biker racer. He was top in his age class in the state. He had sponsorships and he would mountain bike, and he was unbelievable at this. He was beating guys that were 20 years younger than him. He was that good. And he fell and he broke his back. And obviously he wanted to keep riding, but he wanted to keep walking and living. So in the United States, under our healthcare system, for whatever reason, the only thing they could do is fuse him together. They told him he'd never ride again. He'd probably be sore and have issues. And that was with the technology to fuse him together. So he did research like this around the world and found a place in Germany. Obviously he had to play out of his pocket, but he said it was a fraction of the cost in the US. He had to pay out of pocket, but they said they could fix him that so he could ride and he would be healthy. It was state-of-the-art technology. So he went to Germany. I think his sister went with him, and he was there healing for about 3 weeks, came back, and he is completely healed. He can run, walk, jump, ride, compete. But that was possible because he went overseas and he researched and found other technologies that our doctors didn't have. So I think it's really important to do that research and ask the question, are there cures or solutions outside of our medical system?
Did you do that?
I didn't, and I didn't leave the country. But what I did do, I actually had people go and visit and who had doctor friends outside of this country and look at outside clinics to see if they had success with my disease. What most people don't realize, there are clinics right on the other side of the border in Mexico. There are clinics in Germany, in Switzerland, and all over the world, Spain, that have clinics that can do things that you can't do in the United States.
Like what?
Well, many of the alternative treatments that were very successful in the United States have all been pushed outside of the United States due to, FDA and pharmaceutical pushback. And don't want to get too deep into that, but that's why they've pushed them outside of the country. So, and at some point, I had thought about going down there. I haven't needed to yet, but we'll talk about that in future podcasts. But there are all kinds of alternative locations and things that can be done. And I know people who've personally done that, and it's helped them greatly.
My friend Scott Schmerin actually took his wife down to Mexico, and she lost her battle with cancer, but yeah, that was his last hope to go down there.
Yeah, and I think again, in other episodes, as we talk about my protocol, I'll tell you some of the protocols that I do that have come from overseas and that they don't use here. And it's just part of my daily life now that I've gotten from international and global doctors.
So this, just taking some notes on what you gave us today, getting the first diagnosis, exhale and breathe.
Right.
Just take a minute, kind of digest it. 2, find a key advocate. Find that person that's going to be your ride or die sitting next to you.
Yes.
What happens if you don't have somebody, Bill? What happens if you just...
I will tell you that is one of the hardest situations. Now, the systems do have people that can help, and you can ask for help and ask for somebody to help you compile these notes and make sure you're on track with your plan. You can do it. It's much harder if you don't. I will tell you, it would have been much harder for me if I didn't have an advocate and Dana doing all the things she was doing. And my sister was also incredibly helpful. So they helped me crystallize and clarify my thoughts on this. So if you don't, it is much tougher, but you can ask for help at the hospital systems to help with the information.
So you could grab the notes off the website you told us about.
Yeah.
Analyze those. And then, ask for your diagnosis and your prognosis. Know what that is. Correct?
Really know what it is. Some people, they think they know, but they don't. When you ask them detailed questions, they're not as knowledgeable as they should be.
So that will give you your path on some sort of recovery or treatment.
Yes.
Right? So, and then take that to get a second opinion would be your next step.
Yes, then I would do it. And, a lot of people get nervous about that. They say, I don't want to offend the doctor. Listen, we live in a consumer world. The healthcare system is very expensive. Before you spend, even if it's a deductible or whatever your healthcare situation is with your insurance company, still get a second opinion. It's your health. Take the time, be the consumer of your health, and spend more time than you do on your TV.
I like that. I'll go look at 5 different cars, but let's do this doctor right out the gate.
Right, exactly.
Just stay here. This looks good.
Yeah, even if it feels a little odd, do it. It's your health. Nobody cares about your health more than you.
Because it is like the first episode. We talked, there are doctors that were the bong hit guys, and there are doctors that were the A students. Exactly. Let's not roll the dice and see which one we get.
Yeah, if you may have the D- doctor, get the A+ doctor. It's your health.
He works at the place with the green cross. He's your CBD guy. So second opinion, and then the CRD, compare, research and decide.
Yeah, and because that, I think once you've thought through all that and you've made a decision about what your path forward, that'll also give you some comfort and give you some peace of mind. So you're like, okay, I know what we're doing. And then you start working it every day and see where it goes. You can always modify your plan. And by the way, we'll talk more about that things change. Cancer is a dynamic disease that you can be doing great for a while. And then if it doesn't do as well, you might have to modify your protocol. That's what the doctor's watching for. So, but once you get that decision and you've decided on that path, it really does. It allows you to exhale and say, okay, I feel better now. I know what we're doing.
Well, and it has to be a crossroads too. They say that the body reacts to fear in two ways: fight or flight.
Absolutely.
So you have to make that decision on what you want to do at that moment.
I think you have to understand that you can do things to help yourself, and you've got to learn them, and you've got to do them, and you've got to embrace everything you can do. Now, one of the things I think when I researched alternatives, I decided not to leave the country and go to Mexico or go to Switzerland. But through that research, like I said in the first episode, I decided to do a juice cleanse and to start on a German protocol for my morning stuff. So that was how I started out of the gate and integrated. Those were things that I felt I could do to help my doctor. Let's cleanse my body. Let's see if I can help give my body things that will help me deal with the chemo that, I lost all my hair and it was making me weak. Chemo doesn't make you feel good. So all that powerful chemo that kept me alive, I wanted to cleanse my body from that, but also help my body be stronger to help my doctor. Because remember, the next phase, once we got the plan, the next phase was to clean out my system so I could get ready for a stem cell transplant. That was the plan. But they said, hey, a lot of people don't ever get healthy enough. So my goal was to get healthy as fast as I could and do everything I could to help my doctor. I learned all of that from reading books and being online and listening to other doctors.
Can we put that German regiment on a link?
Yes, we will. And that we can talk about that. That is actually called a Budwig protocol. I'll talk about that in another episode as we get to nutrition and methodologies and modalities of how to heal.
There's that word, modalities.
Modalities?
I know you like saying that.
That's right. I sound intelligent.
You had me at modality. The one thing you always told me is if your mind's not right, it's pointless to go and do anything else. I mean, it's not pointless, but you got to get your mind right first. So should we take the next episode and really dive into that?
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. The next episode we're going to call Mind Your Mind, and it's about getting your head right. And as I said, the first thing you have to do when you get a diagnosis, you got to breathe and make sure your head stays in a good place so you can think clearly. It's very hard to do. But so once you've gone through this, then there are techniques and things you can do to help your mind. And it's amazing how powerful our brain is. It's the most important tool we have in healing. It's the most important tool we have in life to be successful. And we're going to dive deep into that called Mind Your Mind, Frank.
I'm excited about that one because it's not only for cancer patients, it's meditation and breathing has helped me get through jumps in my career, becoming more and more successful and growing my business and be able to manage that mentally. It helped me get married, to find the right wife to calm my mind down so I could be a better husband. And it allows me to visualize to make things like doing this podcast with you happen. So I'm really excited about this one. I think we got some great tips to share with everybody. It's things that both of us have used, not an advertisement for anybody, just things you and I do in our normal days that have been amazing. And I think it's going to be a great episode next time.
Fantastic. Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right, I'm Frank.
And I'm Bill.
And we're Dead Man Talking.
This has been Dead Men Talking. Tune in to our next episode for more of Frank and Bill.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having.